Welcome back to Lawsuits and Lessons, people. I hope your 2026 is off to a great start. A lot of stuff going on. It is January, the end of January when this will air. And, I don't think about, making these long-term predictions. Just go out and do what you got to do. Because I'll tell you, a guy who does what he has to do, and he's always on the ball and he's always making happen. Our host, John Fagerholm. What's up, John?
What's up, Steve? Well, most of the time, there's days that I just have these lazy days where I don't want to do anything but sit on the couch, eat some ice cream, watch some Netflix, and just like everybody else. But yeah, for the most part, I try to get things done.
It's funny you talk about Netflix. I was flipping around because we have all these stations and there's nothing to watch. I mean, I have Hulu, Amazon in it. I mean, I sit there and I started watching Peaky Blinders, which is very good. But I checked out this show. You got to check out. It's called His and Hers. And it's with the guy, John Bernthal. And it's really good. So people watch His and Hers. It's like a suspense crime thing, which, I think, you would probably like, John, because you seem like a true crime show type of guy.
Nah, my favorite is 80s teen movies, to be honest with you. So I don't know about the true crime stuff.
All right. Well, that's always good to know. John Hughes was a king, a legend, and it's always good. And my friend John Kapelos was in 16 Candles and The Breakfast Club. He played the janitor, and he's a great guy. He's done Cooper Talk like 4 times. Anyway, so, the show is called Lawsuits and Lessons. And it's funny because tonight we have you, a lawyer and entrepreneur, and our guest is a friend of yours who was a lawyer and now he's an entrepreneur. You sort of left the law thing, if I get the gist right, but you introduced him. I want to hear all about this because I know you guys are going to have a lot to talk about.
Yeah, this is my good friend, Jesse Rosenblatt. Great guy, known him, I don't know, probably going on 15 so years. We had like this boot camp session, I think it was like 2011, where a bunch of guys got together and towards the end of the year, we held each other accountable for goals that we needed to achieve. And it was kind of like what I was saying, Steve, is I don't really set goals. I have these lists, and then at the end of the year, I pick 3 things and I make sure I do it the last 100 days. So this is where that all started from. So Jesse and I have been tight since then. We don't talk as much as we used to. We used to actually hang out a lot until Jesse's first baby came. Then, of course, the hangouts were slower. And now that he's in Hawaii, we don't see each other very much. And as great as Jesse is, I like hanging out with his wife, Sarah, even more. She's hilarious, just a great gal. And together they make a great team and a great couple. So I love spending time with Jesse, and I love spending time with the both of them.
All right. Well, Jesse, jump on. We want to see you. We want to talk to you. We want to hear all about you.
Wow. I mean, I got the glowing intro. I appreciate it, John. I miss you. It's great to see you, even if it's on camera. And, got a little flowers for my wife. So that was nice. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I miss her. Sarah was so much fun.
She is. She keeps everybody laughing here in Hawaii. So you have to come visit.
We should have Sarah as a guest at some point too, because not only does she tell great stories, that's one of the things I love about her most, but she has an entrepreneurial background too, and has a great Hollywood story, as a writer and all this great stuff. So we might touch a little bit into that today too, because Jesse's involved in a lot of that stuff too. But yeah, great couple.
I went to your website, and you were a lawyer first. And you were, tell me about your law career, because I always wonder when people leave the law field, it has to be like, you have to have a good feeling when you're a lawyer. It sounds weird, but I grew up in Cherry Hill, so everyone's like, marry a lawyer. What made you decide to go into law? And then what made you decide to get out of law?
And I'll clarify as I go. I do still practice law, sort of always have one foot in that. I think that's something that I will enjoy, and I like helping people. And so that's something that's always a part of me. But I'll just be honest, as a kid, I think I adopted the narrative that was handed down from my parents and my grandparents, who just said, this kid likes to argue a lot, negotiate, and he should be a lawyer. And so I kind of heard that enough growing up, and I said, oh, I should be a lawyer. Okay. I knew I wanted to work in entertainment or film. And that was something that I really wanted to explore. I didn't know how to do it. I was a kid in Queens. And I ended up going to law school and then working in corporate law on Wall Street for a bit, which was awful, and I don't recommend it. But then I was able to just keep meeting people and keep positioning myself so that if there was an opportunity, I could capitalize on it. And I got a job working at a big law firm that represented a lot of the film studios and TV networks, and then transitioned out of that to be a film executive for a bit with a film company in New York. And then I was there for about a year, and I said, I think I want to leave and go do my own thing. And so I left just about 20 years ago. I've been doing my own thing. I've really loved it. I think what's interesting about the work that I do as a lawyer is that I've been a lot on the corporate company side, and I've also done a lot with, smaller teams and individuals who are creators and talent and people that are trying to get their dreams to come true. And I like, using my powers for good, as I say, and making sure that I get the opportunity to help people build things up. Unlike John, I just don't have the temperament so much for anything that involves stepping into court and duking it out. It's just not as much, not that John doesn't, but I like building things up is really my strong suit, and being strategic about that. And then along the way, I just, wherever something seemed interesting to me, I've definitely dipped my toe in some interesting entrepreneurial waters. I've done some things that are, really interesting. Some worked out in ways, some didn't. The one thing I can say for sure is that they never quite work out the way you expect. And I think you just have to keep your optimism hat on and say, okay, well, what do I get out of this? And what did I learn, and who did I meet? And, if you have an entrepreneurial mindset, there's unlimited opportunity if you do things that are interesting.
That's an interesting part of that you said, Jesse. Probably every entrepreneur, including myself, that we've had on this show, one of the key things is not giving up, right? So I think that what we say is the difference between an entrepreneur and a person that's just tried something is, if one thing fails, do they keep going, or do they say, well, this isn't for me? And so that's interesting what you just said. Tell us about one that failed that you learned the most from, or one that just stands out.
I've had some epic failures. And I think that's also hopefully why I succeed in other ways. I worked with a startup that had a lot of promise and an interesting technology, and ended up, every stereotype you could think of, drugs and hookers. And
well, you must have had a good time.
Unfortunately, I was on the painful end of the drugs and the embezzlement and the hookers. It wasn't the fun part.
Oh, you didn't get to enjoy the drugs and hookers. Well, that's too bad.
I was not. I was hoping that the powers that be at the company were, keeping their eye on the ball, and it seemed like they weren't. So, and very easily it turned into a kind of a shit show, and very easily could I have looked at that and said, I'm never doing this again. I'm never getting into any sort of entrepreneurial environment. This was something that I thought had immense potential, had a great team, and look what happened. But, I've always kind of looked at that experience and said, the people I met are still, some of them, friends for life, and I've learned from them, and I've met other interesting people through them. And I'm sure I've learned things about, trusting my intuition and keeping my antenna up, and, they're not always going to work out. Not everybody's going to treat you the way you would want to be treated, or that you might treat them. But I think there's definitely something to be gained from every experience. I'm a strong believer that there's no such thing as failure if you've done something.
Well, you know what? I got to say, it's funny because you both bring up the point that, you never quit. Don't quit. And it's funny because I've noticed after the pandemic and being back in the business world in South Jersey, I've noticed like everyone all of a sudden became an entrepreneur. It's like everyone started a podcast. Everyone, and then you always ask, well, why'd you become an entrepreneur? And they go, oh, I got tired of corporate. And I'm thinking, and you talk to people and you think you probably sucked at corporate. Okay. And so they sit there, but they become an entrepreneur, but then something doesn't work and boom, they scurry back to that old job because they don't have it in their heart. And I think there was a point, as I said, especially at the pandemic, people were stuck at home. I think entrepreneur, you know how there used to be like karaoke was big and then stand-up comedy is big. I think entrepreneurship was big, but the true guys like you guys who are in the trenches, who have dealt with failure and had success, but you still are always looking for that next big thing, are the people that really last, because there's so many fly-by-night entrepreneurs, which just sounds weird because all the entrepreneurs I know who are successful are like actors and comedians I know who are successful. They've eaten shit a bunch of times, but you guys have been resilient. I mean, so what made you keep resilient, Jesse? Because, was it your upbringing? Did you grow up with a strong work ethic? Because you left a good job. You had some great positions, money, I see on your website, 6-figure jobs. It's hard to leave them. What kept you resilient when, as you said, you go through the shit show with this company? What keeps you in it?
I think a couple of things. I think I definitely have an innate work ethic I've had since I was a kid. I grew up in the 80s. I was an only child. I was a latchkey kid. I would come home and, do my work and kind of fend for myself. I think there's something to that with whatever negatives might come from being an 80s kid. I have an innate curiosity that will never go away. So if there's an opportunity to do something interesting that I find interesting, or with interesting people, and kind of see where it goes and add value and come up with strategy and come up with ways to execute and ways to bring things out into the world, I find that really interesting. And I think just not being afraid to make mistakes and not being afraid to learn. I was thinking about this as you were speaking. When I started my own law firm, that was really my first entrepreneurial venture. And the thing that nobody talked to me about, and I struggled with a lot at the beginning, was I had been in this corporate, worker bee mode, and you're getting told what to do. You have bosses, you have people you answer to, and then switch to overnight, you're the boss. And I think especially at the beginning, I was acting like the boss to myself, except I wasn't showing up. And so I didn't have anybody telling me what to do. I had to figure it out for myself. And I didn't have anybody saying, okay, this is what you should do to generate X revenue or X clients. I just kind of floundered a bit and was so used to that rat race, that hamster wheel where you're in the system, that it took me a bit to really figure out, oh, okay, now I have to, shit or get off the pot. And if I don't go out and get clients, I'm not going to have them. Or if I don't, motivate myself to do it, nobody else is going to. And I think that over time has been great, because now I get to enjoy the things I do. And I know that I'm the one doing it. And at the end of the day, I get to see the results of my labor, for better or worse. And I think that's good. John, what's your take on sort of what keeps you going?
Kind of the same thing, Jesse, just interest. Every time I say, well, 2028, I'm going to stop doing everything and I'm just going to visit my friend Jesse in Hawaii for a few months, then some other creative thing comes my way and I'm like, oh, I want to do that. And what's interesting about being an 80s kid, for example, versus a kid today, I think, obviously I didn't grow up in the 2000s, so I don't know for sure, is that it would be so much easier to be an entrepreneur with all the tools and information you have. But I don't think they grow up with the same mindset. So I think that's the hindrance, right? Whereas we grew up without the tools and the information, and you had to sink or swim, like what you were saying, right? And that's what happens to most attorneys that try to start their own firm, is they figure out, well, wait a minute. I thought I was going to have more free time, but I have less free time, because now I'm not just practicing law, but I'm also running a business, right? So I no longer have a marketing department, a billing department, all these other departments that took care of all these things when I worked at a firm. And all I had to do was look at paperwork all day, right? Today, it's just so much easier, just with all the tools and the technology and everything else. And so I think this is going to be either the golden age of entrepreneurs, especially with AI and everything else, or it's going to be just more people with all of these tools that they're not using to the fullest, right? Hey, I use ChatGPT to ask questions about, what's the state flower of New Jersey, instead of, going, hey, how do I do this particular thing, or do this particular thing for me? And I've always thought things like, I want to start an online store one of these days, because I have all these products that I use and I want to be able to sell them, because people always ask me about these products. Hey, what's that cologne you're wearing, because it smells so good, or different things like that, right? And I was like, man, if I'm getting that comment enough times, I'm like, I should be selling this thing, right? And now you can actually do it. You just speak into this computer on a particular app and it creates it all for you. So now is the time, and hopefully these young kids will understand that they're living in potentially the golden age of creativity and entrepreneurship.
You know what's funny, and I've noticed this from Jesse and past guests and you, John, every entrepreneur we talk to always says they left their job because they wanted to have more free time. But then it turns out you work your asses off. So, I mean, is it just because you're happier and it feels like free time? Because everyone says, oh, I have all this free time. But then it's like, you got this going on, you got this going on, you got boom, 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 this, all these, things going. Is it just that it doesn't seem like work now, or you're just out of the bullshit structure where you now can say, hey, you know what? If I want to work from 1 PM till 3 AM on something, I can. I don't have to answer to anybody, because all of you guys are saying you did it for the free time, but yet you always had this impeccable work ethic and it's amazing workload. I mean, what do you think that's about, Jesse?
I think it's control over your own time. I think that's a big one. When you work, how you work, everyone's different. Everyone has different needs day by day, and, different schedules, things they want to go do, things they want to go do, when they go to the gym, when they don't. So I think having control over that just gives you, even if you're working as hard, you're working smarter for the way that suits your lifestyle. And I think that gives you a lot of, happiness over time, even with the stresses that may come with it. And I definitely think that I think John would probably echo this, choosing who you work with is a big thing. Nobody told me enough or at all, probably when I was young, when you're going to work for someone or somewhere, make sure they're not an asshole. Figure it out. Like you have to, no money is worth being in an environment where you're working with people who you just don't like, don't respect, don't treat you well. And, I wish I would have had more of a sense early in my career to take care of myself, my mind, and my physical body as well. I didn't do that. And so it led me right to, a point where you would look on paper from the outside and go, oh my God, he's so successful. And I felt miserable and I was not feeling successful at all. So I think giving yourself the chance with the challenges that come to create your own lifestyle, to create your own environment and pick the people you work with, I think that goes a long way.
So I want to make one comment on that, but then I want to go back to your lifestyle, Jesse. But I don't want to miss this thought. And the thought is what I figured out later. Cooper, you were saying, why would you work so hard for all this free time or whatever? For me, it's all been front end loaded. You work just unbelievably hard for all of these years, and then it starts working out, and then you bring in people and they start taking more of the stress away and the workload away, and then suddenly you have this money machine coming in, or this machine that's creating money, and then you have a lot more free time than you thought you would have. And I run into that a little bit now, where I have more free time than I want a lot of times, where I go, what am I doing? Okay, well, I guess I'll go to the mall and see what's happening there, right? So I've really had to figure out that I really need to schedule my day and fill it with things. And weekends are like that for me too, right? So on weekends, I really have to fill my day up because I just feel bored. I don't have anything to do. Like, but you can only have so many beers with buddies, and you can only go to the park or whatever, and walk the dog however many times. So I really have to fill my day up. And so on the front end, yes, it's a lot of work, but if you do it right on the back end, at some point you're going to go, oh wow, I just have all of this free time, right? And then getting back to your lifestyle, Jesse. So you figured out how to make money and basically live wherever you want, because you're in Hawaii now, but you went from LA to, I don't remember where, but then you went to Portugal at some point and lived there for a while. So tell us about that.
Yeah. For me, it was just about figuring out where home is and seeing different places. So we were in LA, we had lived there for a long time, and we had wanted to see what life was like in Europe, particularly, Portugal. And we had plans to do that. And then COVID sidelined that and we couldn't go. And then we stayed in LA for a bit, and we still felt like we wanted to go somewhere else to have a different experience of life. And so we went to Hawaii and we stayed there for a bit and loved it and felt like home, but we still had this itch that we had to scratch. So we ended up going to Portugal eventually for a year and loved lots of it, but figured out it wasn't for us. And being back in Hawaii has been great, and really, especially for our daughter, it does feel like home. And again, it's just being grateful for the fact that, as an entrepreneur, you can have more say in what your life looks like, or where you go, or where you live. I thought of something as you were speaking, John. I think also something nobody really talked to me about, and I think that it's something that should be talked about more, is how you value your own time, right? Because you see people that do things that from the outside maybe make sense to them, but they're not efficient uses of their time if they really value their time the way they should, or the way they say they do. And so at some point, being an entrepreneur especially, you can go, okay, I have to do that thing, but if I don't do that thing, I could be working and making X dollars. So, okay, is that thing and my experience have to be me, or can I have someone else do it? And finding ways to get support and get help and maximizing the efficiency of your time, I think is really valuable. And it's really challenging, I find, for a lot of people to truly value their time as they should. I don't know if it's an insecurity thing or if people are just not wired to think that way. But I think the sooner you can kind of get a handle on, okay, what is an hour of my time worth? And then where can I shave some time off tasks I don't enjoy and maybe get some support or hire out people to do it to help, so that I can use my time more efficiently to do the things that I really enjoy.
Both of you guys have talked, like, you moved to Portugal, you were in Hawaii. Now, John, you're from Washington and you were in LA, you're in San Antonio. Do you think it's important for the entrepreneur mindset to move, to change surroundings, do you think, or if you stay in one area, you think you may get stagnant, or do you think it adds to your creativity and your drive? Because it seems like a lot of people that have come on here have moved. They've been in different places. I mean, I want to understand what you guys think about that, because you're both guys who have moved around. And, and like John, you have two homes now, but you're from somewhere else. And you said, New York, then LA, then Portugal, and now Hawaii. How important do you think that is to the entrepreneurial process?
I think it's a couple of things. I think it's a curiosity. I think entrepreneurial mindset tends to be curious, and it's very hard to even know if where you are and where you've grown up or where you've lived for a long time is the spot for you and the best place for you, unless you've explored and seen enough of other places. I think that's kind of important. And sometimes it's tricky to go a place for a few days and think you got a real flavor for what it would be like to live there. So I think it's part the curiosity that maybe an entrepreneur mind has. I think it's part the boldness or bravery to try new things and go to new places. I moved to LA for a job because it was my first job doing entertainment law. I got hired. I had never stepped foot in LA. I had a chip on my shoulder as a New Yorker that I was going to make it in New York, and I wasn't going to have to go out to LA and be out there with those people, which is what I was raised to think. It was like a very stereotypical projection of what LA was like and what the people in LA were like. So, and I would never have known, and I wouldn't have met my wife, and I wouldn't have led to the career I've had. So, just keeping a broader open mind is really important as an entrepreneur. And part of that is where you live. And I think where you live and where you spend most of your time is incredibly important and to your overall quality of life. And so, I have friends that still live in the house they grew up in back in New York. And I always wonder, they seem happy, but how do they know? And I don't mean to be sort of pejorative about it, but if you've only lived in one place, how do you know that's where you're happiest? Maybe that's 10% of how happy you could be, but you've never lived somewhere else, right?
Well, I always say that real quick. I always say that because down where I come from, a lot of people have been going to years going to the Jersey Shore. They go to the Jersey Shore for a week and they spend like $3,000 or $4,000 at this house at the Jersey Shore. And they go to the same bars. And I'm like, for that money, you could go to Chicago for a week. You could go to, you could go to England. You go, and I always wonder the same thing. Like, why? Like, aren't you missing something? Like, you could just take a flight to New Orleans, have a blast, and come back. And I think it's something that it's a curiosity, because you're just like, it's very like, I've been doing this forever. What I want to keep doing it. That's like working a 9 to 5 and hating it.
Yeah, my thoughts on what moving does for you or doesn't do for you. I'm not sure. For me, it's slightly different than what Jesse said. So I moved from Seattle, which I loved and had a great life there, simply because I wanted to do entertainment law, and Seattle wasn't the place. So LA was the place, right? And I love LA. I still live half my life there. It's not as great as it was, in my opinion, when we were running the streets, Jesse, and Cooper too. But streets of Burbank with Cooper, it isn't the same, but it's different type of opportunity, right? So I'm half-time in San Antonio for the real estate opportunities. And I'm still half-time in LA because of the law firm. Now, I couldn't do what I do with law in California the same as here in Texas, because the laws here are different. And even though I'm barred here and I could practice here, oil, accidents, like it's just completely different practice of law. And I have a lot of lawyer friends here. In fact, my very good friend was the main defense guy for the Uvalde case. So I've been following that. I don't know if you guys have been following that Uvalde shooting case. But when I sit and talk with my friends here in San Antonio that are practicing law, I wouldn't want to do that type of law, right? But in San Antonio, my real estate business is doing really well, right? Because you can still buy, a 3-bedroom house for $100K here. And fix it up for another 20 and then rent it out, right? You can't do that in LA. And so some of the laws, some of the tax things just don't make it profitable to own real estate as a landlord in Los Angeles, at least. I don't know about other places in California. So I've sold everything that I had in California, except for the one place that, my place in Burbank that Steve's been to many times. In San Antonio, I'm just trying to gobble up everything I can gobble up, but along with everybody else from California that moved here, so it's just whatever the opportunity is. And I do agree with you, Jesse, that, going to new places and then meeting new people and doing new things, and it creates all these other opportunities that you don't have, but you do need to find where it makes you happy. And business and fun, I'm happy in LA, but lifestyle and chill and good people and safe neighborhoods, I really like San Antonio.
Well, also, we always talk about entrepreneurs being risk takers. You take a risk. Well, when you move somewhere new, you are taking a risk. Like Jesse, when you moved from New York to LA, you didn't know anyone. When I moved to the West Coast, I only been there once or twice, and you're taking that risk. And that's a lot of times people are afraid to do. But I think that risk also, it transfers to like you in your business life and your entrepreneurial spirit.
It's about finding and going after what you want and what is going to satisfy you or make you happy or some combination, right? I mean, I feel lucky that I was able to do it, but I'm probably on the short list of people in the world who moved from Hawaii to Portugal, around the world, back to Hawaii, right? We could have easily sat in Portugal and said, it's not quite for us, but we're here. We just got rid of most of our possessions. We're comfortable. We've got new friends. Let's just stay here because we're here. But we're just not those people. For us, it was about what's really going to make us happy and what's going to be best for our daughter. And so we were willing to make that move a second time. And people thought we were nuts.
Yeah, when you were moving back to Hawaii, I think we talked. I don't remember. I think it was right after you moved back to Hawaii. We had a conversation. You told me something really funny about Portugal. Because I was like, Portugal, I heard that was great. And then you said they must have the greatest marketing team in all of history. So tell us about that.
There are a lot of great things about Portugal. I'm certainly not going to shit on Portugal. I will say that for us, though, some of the things that were most important didn't match up to what our experience was in Portugal. We're coming from Hawaii, we were warm weather people. And a lot of people say Portugal has the best weather. And compared to other places in Europe, especially Nordic countries, yes, it does have nicer weather for sure, but also rained every day for basically 4 months while we were there. And that was like Seattle weather. And my wife's from Seattle and she didn't want to move back to a Seattle climate, right? She wanted to go somewhere that would be more sunny and warm. That just wasn't that. There were some challenges. I think even Portuguese folks, natives would admit there's some challenges about efficiency and bureaucracy that are rooted in how things are done. And that was challenging, to us to kind of get a foothold on how our life was going to be and get answers to questions, whether they were, government related or something to do with some sort of bureaucratic issue. It could be challenging. I think it's fair to say Portuguese people would admit that as well. So again, though, we could have stayed and would have had a good enough life and made lots of friends, but it just wasn't the best life. And I think, we all deserve to chase our best life. And I think that's important. And if you can find a way to get yourself there and provide for yourself the means to do that, I think we all should do that.
I forgot that Sarah was from Seattle. That's why we have that cool connection. I totally forgot about that.
I've met lots and lots of people. I'm sure we all have, endless, lists of contacts. And you have always struck me as somebody that is definitely like the closest, if not, one of the top 2 or 3 closest people I know to who I think of as like the wolf from Pulp Fiction. He's like the guy that it doesn't matter what's going on. If you talk to John, he's going to have a good answer for you. He's going to have a solution. He's going to help you problem solve. He's going to help you figure it out. What do you attribute that to? Was that something you always had, or is that something that you developed over time, either by desire or because you had to in some environment? Like, I just admire that so much about you. You're just such an incredible resource as a friend. I feel lucky to know you. And I know that no matter what's going on in the world, if I talk to you about it, I'm going to get a really interesting perspective and something that's going to make me feel a little bit better about, the opportunities that are there that I might not see.
Well, I appreciate that, Jesse. I mean, people always view you different than you view yourself. I mean, there's lots of times that there was turmoil in my life and maybe I didn't handle it as well as I should. But I think it's stoicism. Like I really am into the Marcus Aurelius, the stoicism, all of that stuff. And what's funny is when I was in 4th grade, and I come from a little bit of a tough background, I think Jesse, but I remember my 4th grade teacher took me aside and told me about stoicism and in her own way that a 4th grader could understand. But later when I really started looking into it, I remember going, oh, this is the thing she was telling me about in 4th grade. And I remember when she told me that try this, like do this and do these things. And it worked. So then I've always just done it since 4th grade. I've always just tried to say, okay, the world is falling apart, act like it's not, and then, or everything is great, act like it's no different than if the world was falling apart. Just, keep that even keel with everything, So I think it stems from her, and I don't even remember her name, but she was awesome. I think of her often, actually. And one of the few teachers from elementary school I even remember at all. But I've always done that. And, I moved quite a bit as a kid. I was 5 high schools in 5 years, probably just as many junior high schools in 2 years. Right. And then elementary schools, I can't even count. It really worked out well to just be even keeled. And the other thing I found is that when you're even keeled, people want to know what's going on with you because most people are just so open and like, oh yeah, and then when you're not like that, it builds a little mystery that I think people want to know, hey, how come you're not as excited as everybody else is, when that touchdown was scored or whatever, and so I think I've just been doing it so long, I don't even think about it. But inside, a lot of times is not matching the outside.
I have a mentor I'm very grateful to know. And one of the things I admire most, and he helps remind me and teaches me just to kind of take things as they are. Everything just is, right? Nothing means anything unless we decide it means something. So you go through an experience, someone else will say it's shit. You can just say, oh, that happened. And then, okay, what am I going to do next about it? Right. And I think it goes to what you're saying too. It's really fascinating to people because most people are not wired that way. Most people are supercharged and open with their emotions, and everything that happens immediately pulls their emotions to one side or the other. And if you can stay more grounded and more present in what's happening without sort of naming it or giving it too much power over you. I heard this really interesting thing I'll share in case it's of interest to you guys, but this is a bit of a pivot, but human brains, going back to when we were in tribes, are oriented towards the negative because, if you didn't hear some good news, nothing happened. But if you didn't hear the neighboring tribe was coming to kill you, your whole family gets wiped out, right? So we have a natural tendency, whether we like it or not, to be oriented towards the negative. And then I heard somebody say, and I thought this was fascinating, and I'm kind of paraphrasing, but if you're not just being present and taking an experience for what it is, and then you're moving, you have a preconceived notion of what you like or what you don't like, every experience has a 75% chance of being negative for you. Because if you're afraid of spiders and you're walking in a field, right? Either you're afraid of a spider and you see a spider, so that's negative. You're afraid of a spider and you don't see a spider, but you got yourself all worked up, so it's negative. You're not afraid of a spider and then one shows up, so you're freaked out, so that's negative. Or you're not afraid of a spider and then a spider doesn't show up. So 3 out of 4, most people are walking through their lives once they start to sort of give things meaning with experiences that predominantly are negative. And I think that's hard for people to offset. So when you talk about, John, you being really sort of mysterious in that way of being grounded and stoic and just kind of taking things where they are, I think that's actually a really healthy way to live that we could all benefit from being a bit more like.
I guess I'm Jesse. You mentioned your mentor. How important do you think mentors play a role in people as you being a mentor or on you having a mentor? Do you think that's very important to the entrepreneurial mind? It's where someone you can bounce ideas off of, or how is an important mentor valuable to you?
Sure. I mean, my mentor, Mike, is insanely valuable to me. And it's so much less about specific scenarios as it is about mindset, and it is about approach. And, he informs so much of how I want to be more the version of myself I want to be. And I think that's incredibly valuable because that keeps me grounded when I'm making decisions in business or as an entrepreneur. I think similarly, teaching others and being a mentor to others is really valuable and really important because that helps you reinforce for yourself things that you already think or believe, but also leaves you open to find the gaps where you might have blind spots and you might want to do something differently. But then when you're talking to somebody about it or trying to give them some education about how they could live, their life more in a more fulfilling way, you go, oh shit, I guess I need to do that myself. All right. I'm preaching to the choir. And also I think we've all in some way had people who have helped guide us, mentors come in all shapes, right? John's 4th grade teacher, right? You never know who your mentor is going to be, but we all need them and we all have them in different forms. And I think there's a moral responsibility to give back and to be that to other people. And I think unfortunately you meet a lot of people throughout the business world in different walks of life, different vocations, and don't see it that way. They're very closed off. They're very much about me, me, me. And I think, it's a shame.
Tell us what you're doing now. You said mentorship, so I know that that's part of your life and part of what you're doing. But tell us all of the entrepreneurial endeavors that you're in, and let's talk about the ones you love and the ones that maybe you don't love so much.
I think at the moment I'm grateful. I'm really enjoying the things I'm doing. So as I said, I still practice entertainment law. I still enjoy working with clients. I enjoy helping people build things up, and although it sounds maybe a bit lofty, but fulfill their dreams if they're trying to make something happen. I do think there's value in that, and I really enjoy that. It makes me feel fulfilled, and I like the work that I get to do there. I'm on the board of an AI technology company right now that's really interesting. It's kind of in stealth mode, so I can't say too much about it, but totally fascinating to me that it's an aspect of technology and computers that I didn't really know a ton about. And I think that's another thing that I enjoy is working with people who have different experiences and different expertise, and learning from them as they learn from me. I might teach somebody something about negotiation. They might teach me something about technology and software and coding. But I definitely think that that's something I'm really excited about. I think it has potential to make an impact in the world, which is always, said this outright, but I do try to find things that I enjoy, but also make a difference in some way in the world or have a positive impact. I think I enjoy that through mentoring or through the charity work I've done. I always find that that's valuable. And then, I have a short list of clients I work with as, a coach, and really what I do as coach, because that term kind of gets thrown around a lot, but I have had a really interesting life experience where I've been in very corporate environments. I've been in very entrepreneurial environments. I've been successful when I didn't feel successful. And maybe I was successful in other ways that, are really what I think success is. And I know, and I've been fortunate enough to meet some people that have had success in careers and are feeling unfulfilled. And I think because of the experience I've had and because I'm also a really voracious learner of how we operate as humans and how we can live more fulfilling, better lives. I have, like I said, a short list of clients that I work with that I try to help them, reframe and go after the things that they really want in life. And I think at the end of the day, we all deserve to be happy. We all deserve to get up every day and do work that feels fulfilling and feels purposeful and feels like we're working with people we enjoy. And if you're not doing that, then it's very easy to stay on autopilot and coast and continue on whatever path you're on. But, if you can interrupt that cycle and really give yourself a chance to shift gears and figure out what you really want to be doing, I think that's really important. And not enough people do that, unfortunately.
How do you find your clients to coach? Because, I've read your resume, and yeah, you're an entrepreneur, you're a lawyer, you've been in entertainment business. You've had a very successsul career, but as you said, you faced failures. Now, I know a lot of business coaches back here who are just jackasses. I mean, they've had one job. They don't, I mean, I sit there and go, you're looking at me, you don't even know how to put a shirt on right. You're going to coach me? How do you make the point that you have had a successful track record? And like you said, you failed, which a lot of times people don't want to say that. And for me, if I was looking for a coach, I would want someone who has succeeded, but who has also failed, because you know what not to do wrong. You've been there. So how do you find clients when there is so much bullshit out there?
There 100% is. Yeah. Unfortunately, there's, like I said, it's kind of gets, coach, self-improvement. These are terms that just get thrown around. I'm fortunate that people who've known me, know that this is I love talking about, humans and how we operate. I love talking about little subtle shifts people can make to reframe or reevaluate how they're approaching life and make it more fulfilling, more happy, more valuable to them and to the world. So I feel very lucky. People find me. I have a simple website at coachmejesse.com that is out there, and sometimes people find me through that. But mostly it's word of mouth, and mostly, the good thing about being a coach, it's kind of fun. John, I think you'd be a good coach. The good thing about it is people are used to talking to their friends and hearing what they want to hear. And the great thing you get to do as a coach is to talk to people in a way that nobody else in their life is probably talking to them. You get to strip down the facade of who they are publicly or who they are in their business, because everyone has to put on a good face and look successful and look like everything's going great. And that's what social media is built around, right? But that's not the reality of how people live their lives. And so you get to really chip away at at the armor and say, okay, who are you really? What do you really want? I don't buy it. You say this, but it's bullshit. Because if you really wanted that, you'd be doing it. Or, you get to really talk to people in a no bullshit kind of way, and it helps them, reawaken to what matters to them and the things that they're doing. This is a big one. Most people don't realize all the things they're doing in life that are really draining them of energy or not fulfilling, but yet they keep doing it over and over again, and trying to identify those things and strip them away so that you could fill your days with more things that you do enjoy. It's, coaching does get a bad rap, but if you find a good coach, and hopefully I am one, I believe I am, it can really make a difference in people's lives. And it doesn't matter what vocation you are or where you are in your corporate career or where you are as an entrepreneur or where you are as a creative. I think everyone you'll be valued by talking to somebody that can ask them the tough questions, even if it just reinforces for you, that you're doing what you want to be doing. But most people don't have anyone in their life that's asking them those questions. And I think, that's why I think you'd be really good at it, John.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But that brings up another question. What do you think people respond to the most? Because, for example, I know that I don't respond to, hey, can you do this, please? Or, hey, it would be great. Or, hey, I have a good idea. What I respond to is somebody offending me or slighting me. Then I feel like, ooh, I got to show this guy. But the bad part about that is, even if you show them, you have a negative feeling about this person, so it's never going to be a person in your life, right? So there must be a better way than waiting for someone to, to do something negative to me that motivates me to show them what I'm made of. You know what I mean? So what do you think? Just as a little side note, I actually look for people that I want to prove things to, because I know it motivates me. Like, oh, I'm going to prove that to this guy. And it's just a funny thing I do in my head. And I call it getting my Harry, right? And it's just basically from an Amway tape I heard 35 years ago, where the guy was talking about his brother-in-law saying he couldn't make any money and he wouldn't make it in Amway. So he's like, wanted to prove to his brother-in-law. And so now I just go, oh, that's my new Harry, right? Like somebody that I want to prove something to. But anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jesse.
No, it's fine. I have a version of that. I call it my justice complex. I think I've always, I must have seen stuff in my early life particularly, but it really ruffles my feathers when I see people doing other people wrong, or doing, the wrong thing, or hurting other people, or taking advantage of them. It just like totally irritates me. And so there's a part of me that always wants to, by default point out to people that, hey, you're doing this wrong, or hey, you're treating that person wrong. And so I think we all have, to answer your question, I don't know that there's one universal answer. I mean, I think we all, wake up when people piss us off, when people disrespect us. I think there's that. But to your point about stoicism, you don't have to let that bother you. You can just, treat everybody, one of the things I think has really helped me, and I try to, encourage this in my daughter. I try to encourage it more in my own life or my friends. Again, I don't think it's talked about enough, but really understanding the concept of empathy, right? Like when people piss me off these days, like I tend not to get bothered by it. I tend to immediately wonder what's going on in their life that made them act that way. Somebody cut somebody else off in traffic. Like what, in a shitty way. Like what was going on in that, what was going on in that person's life that made them do that? And I forget where I heard it, but it was basically like live with curiosity, right? Like be curious. And it really opens you up to seeing a different side of people, seeing a different side of the world. And it honestly, I found, helps you learn more about yourself and how you want to live. And so I certainly won't coach you, John, but
I have a lot of empathy, and that is a very strong point. But I still, though, I don't care what happens. If I hold a door for someone like at a Starbucks and they don't say thank you, I'm like, you're welcome. I mean, that's the only time I'm like a prick.
I'll tell you a shitty story that'll make you feel bad. So I don't remember where I heard this story. Maybe it was like years ago, like Chicken Soup for the Soul, one of those books, right? But basically, like this dad's on a subway with his 3 kids, and his 3 kids are being totally wild, like beyond crazy. They're like swinging around, they're kicking people, knocking into people on the subway. And, the dad's just sitting there kind of head down. And he's not really paying attention. And people on the train are getting pissed off. And the kids are just running up and down and continue banging into people and swinging into people. Watch out, all the people on the train. And eventually somebody comes up to the dad and says something like, hey, what the fuck's wrong with you? Your kids have been running around this train. You haven't said anything to them. You haven't paid any attention. Like, what the hell are you doing? What's wrong with you? And the dad looks up and says, I'm so sorry. They just lost their mother this morning and I just don't know what to do or how to process it. Right. So like, no matter what anybody's doing to you, they're never really doing it to you. Well, not never, but most of the time they're not doing it to you, right? They're just existing in their own experience of life. And so that person that's not holding the door for you at Starbucks, maybe they've, just got some bad news, or maybe, and I'm not saying to excuse terrible behavior, right? Like, cause
I've seen this guy and he sounds like Uncle Leo from Seinfeld. So he can say, you're welcome. That's what I'm saying. I know what you're saying, but no, this guy, you can just tell this guy's an annoying prick.
Jesse, what has been your worst legal issue? Now, that could be you representing somebody or something that you were personally involved in.
I'm going to say, and you mentioned AI earlier, John, maybe this isn't the worst, but I've seen it come up time and time again. People do not value themselves, take themselves seriously enough, or invest in themselves, and they try to do it themselves. And the reason, John, you and I get paid the big bucks for being lawyers is not because of necessarily the work product we're delivering or the outcome necessarily. It's the value and the experience that we have, that we've been doing this for a long time, right? And I think far too often I've seen people get into trouble of varying degrees. Sometimes it costs them, nothing. Sometimes it costs them millions and millions of dollars, and sometimes it costs them, everything that they've built, right? Trying to do things themselves, trying to pull a contract off, the internet or AI, and thinking that automatically means that it's okay and it's good and it's going to protect them. And I think this is, to your point earlier, AI is going to create a lot of problems for people, because I see it all the time. I'll pull up something on ChatGPT and it's flat out wrong. And then I have to, question what else I'm getting that's wrong. And maybe it'll get better over time. I'm sure it will. But at the end of the day, there's a premium you can't, understand that comes from experience, good and bad, right? You and I have seen a ton of shit on all sides, right? And hopefully we're learning every day, and I still make mistakes. I'm sure you probably do too. Recently, John and I were talking about this. I trusted a friend and maybe I shouldn't have. And I'm having to unravel that, right? So having somebody on your team, and whether that's, a lawyer, or whether that's a good tax advisor or accountant, or whether it's whatever the specialty is, you gotta set yourself up for success and do it right from the get-go, and get people on your team or on your side that are going to help you be successful. So, I guess I'm coming from my frame of reference, which is when you were imagining what your success is going to look like, with all your goals reached, with all your, missions accomplished, right? Start from that place and go, okay, well, what am I going to need to get there? And it's not going to serve me to be short-sighted and not pay a good lawyer to help me at the beginning, or it's not going to support me to not get a good lawyer at the beginning to set up my form agreement that I'm going to use to run my business for the next few years. There's just so many versions of that, but I think because of the breadth of it and it does come into play quite a lot. I think that's probably the worst thing I've seen, because it's heartbreaking when you see somebody who's, deserves to have more success, deserves to have better treatment, and could have been avoided if they would have gotten somebody on their team early who knew what they were doing. So I don't know. There it is.
How can people get in touch with you, Jesse?
If you're looking for me for legal services, if you want me to help you negotiate a deal, do a contract, strategize with you about what you're trying to accomplish, you can go email me at Jesse, Jesse, at jesserosenblatt.com, Rosenblatt. If somehow you're out there in the world doing something and you feel like there's more to life, or you're not getting what you want out of life, you're not feeling fulfilled in the ways that you deserve, you're not feeling that your life is as joyful as it should be in whatever form that is, you can reach out to me over at coachmejesse.com. As I said, I don't take on a ton of clients, honestly picky about it, because I ask people to really commit to wanting to make a change and wanting their lives to be better. That's important for me and for them, so that we can have the most benefit in your life. But if that's you, let me know. Hit me up.
And people, don't forget, Lawsuits and Lessons. Go follow us and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, all that. You can get in touch with me at coopertalk.net. Go to my website, coopertalk.net. You'll find over 1,050 episodes of my other podcast Cooper Talk, which I just interviewed the girl who was the cherry pie girl in the Warrant video, Bobby Brown. We just had a great talk the other night for an hour. Also go to Coop's Comedy Corner on YouTube. I have a lot of Emmy-winning writers, some great comedians, and that's how you get in touch with me. And John, take it away.
All right. You can reach me at defendmybiz.com. Jesse, thank you so much. It was great to reconnect. I know we talked on the phone earlier today, and it's never long enough, and I can't wait to see you guys. We're going to have to make a trip out to Hawaii to see you guys. Steve, thank you. You're always great at keeping the conversation going. And to everybody out there listening, thank you. God bless, and always be productive.